Hi everyone, it's Denise from Dobby Books. So today I want to give you an update on my medieval studies, the books I'm reading, the books I finished, as well as what my thoughts are on this particular program that I'm using. So let's get started. As you all know, I'm following the curriculum by Roman Roads Press. The program is called Old Western Culture. I'm currently on their third year program because this is set up over 4 years, like for high school. I'm in the third year one, which is simply entitled Christendom, and it's broken down into 4 units. Unit 1 is the early medievals. Unit 2 is the defense of the faith. Unit 3, the medieval mind. And Unit 4, the Reformation. And just an FYI, this is coming from a Protestant perspective, not a Catholic one. And right now I'm in Unit 1, Early Medievals. And as I was saying in my last video, they're covering the emphasis is on the literature of the time, even though through the lectures there is some history being given, so to fill in those gaps, to give a context for the readings. And in the meantime, there is an emphasis on it's called Christendom, so it's going to have an emphasis on that, which I'm fine with. But I also find myself wanting to fill in those gaps that I don't think are present in this program. Me being an adult and someone who I'm familiar with Protestantism, but I'd like to get a little bit more of a Catholic perspective as well, because the church had this humongous role to play during that time. So far, there was the Rule of Saint Benedict. I read that, and I had a more modern edition that I was reading, and this one was it was paraphrased and introduced by Jonathan Wilson Hartgrove, the Rule of Saint Benedict. And it's updated and it's applicable to our modern time. So he had to reword some things to apply to not just men, but women as well. All right. And then the next one that we read was Procopius. And I was so interested in what Procopius had to say. He worked in the court of the Emperor Justinian, who was in the Eastern Roman Empire. So he got a lot of inside information. He was the historian for Justinian's reign, but I believe he worked directly for Belisarius, who was the military leader for Justinian's royal army. And after Procopius died, a manuscript was published, and it was entitled The Secret History. And this is what Procopius wrote about Justinian's activities, etc., what he was really like behind the scenes. Procopius specifically requested that this be published after his death, and I guess you can understand why. I would like to get The Secret History. I'm still looking for it. I ended up finding another book called Justinian's Flea, which covers, I want to say, the Black Death. So that got me interested. Then we read The History of the Franks by Gregory of Tours, and the Book of Pastoral Rule by Gregory the Great. I didn't really read a lot of that. I only read what I had to read for the questions and answers. It was nice, but maybe one day I'll read it. Right now, I'm not really drawn to read that. It's a pastoral rule, so it's addressing pastors, priests, and their behavior and whatnot. Sure, it was applicable to priests. I mean, and good points for people in their everyday life, to live their lives with integrity, etc. That's good. But the details that it got into that was specific for priests is not something that I could really relate to. It didn't hold my interest a whole lot. So I only read what I had to. And then there were the dialogues by Gregory the Great as well. I did not read all of those, but it was okay. It was good. It's good. Maybe someday I'll pour over it a little bit more. We also read the Confession of St. Patrick, a very small portion. I really didn't want to read all that. I don't know if I'll even purchase it. Maybe. Letter to the Soldiers, also by St. Patrick. Letter to the Soldiers of Coroticus. Life of St. Columba was fine. It was the voyage of Brendan. Kind of, I could see how that would be controversial. Just some of the things, some of the experiences you're like, nuh-uh, like kind of like that. So, and then there's Beowulf. I loved Beowulf. I finished reading Beowulf, and I'm having fun exploring the graphic novel. The graphic novel right now with its great illustrations. Just in case any of you have not seen, the illustrations are really great, and it's mostly illustrations. Very little dialogue, very little text. It's a lot of illustrations. If you're familiar with the story, it's great because you're looking at it, I know what this was. But if you're someone who's never read it, then you're like, oh, this is interesting. And then when you would read the original poem, you'd be like, oh, wow. And you're getting those images back in your head from the graphic novel, which I think is fantastic. And then we are reading currently The Ecclesiastical History of the English People by Bede. And I have this copy here. This is by Oxford University Press. I think this is a fantastic copy. So I'm working my way through this. I want to read it through. I have found it interesting how Bede is going from the beginning. I think Bede is even trying to trace the lineage of Adam and Eve, and he believes that the earth is a certain number of years old, and that leads to other things that you learn about the Christian church and how there were those who believed that the earth was a specific number of years old and it would have a very specific beginning and it would have a very specific end. And then there were those who said, well, no, that's not something we can really know. And so that led to some interesting topics. So I'm currently reading this. I'm not very far. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'll continue after that. I'm going to be reading The Life of Charlemagne by Einhard. I'd like to find a full copy of that. I know there's a book that was for younger audiences called The Lives, plural, The Lives of Charlemagne. I'm curious if I can find that. I don't know how common it is right now, but I'd like to find that because I like to find a young people's version of the same topic. And after this, after Charlemagne, it's going to be The Life of Alfred by Esser and The Fount of Knowledge by John of Damascus, which I know is going to be another religious reading. But in the meantime, because I wanted to fill in those gaps, I decided to search on a subscription that I have. It's called The Great Courses. And I'm listening to a professor. His name is Philip Dayleader. He is from Harvard University, and he taught at the College of William and Mary. And he has done 4 courses at the Great Courses. He has Early Middle Ages, which I finished listening to. So that went from about 650 to 1000. And then now he's in the Middle Ages, which he calls the High Middle Ages, which I guess is easier than saying, the Middle Ages. That's what I'm currently listening to. That's only covering 300 years, so 1000 to 1300. And he's covering topics. He's going over the aristocracy, the warring aristocracy, like the knights and the dukes and the counts, etc. He talks about the peasants. There were the free, there were those that were not free, feudalism, what the townspeople, what it was like for the townspeople. And then he talks about the artisans and the merchants and the guilds. He goes into the monastics, as well as he covers some of the heresies, the Christian heresies that existed at the time, as well as the treatment of Jews and what life was like for Jews in Western Europe, Eastern Europe as well, at the time. He covers the First Crusade and the leaders and significant individuals in the First Crusade. He covers the Norman Conquest as well as the Magna Carta. So that's what I'm covering so far. I have finished with the First Crusade. Now, the Norman Conquest. I heard through the Norman Conquest, and then we'll go into the Magna Carta finally. And after that, I'll be listening to the third of this series, which is the Late Middle Ages, where he covers 1300 to 1500, so just 200 years there. And he's done 2 more courses. One is entitled The Crusades, so we're going to get details on each one of those. And the last one is Charlemagne. So I might explore those, I might not, we'll see. But I'm glad that I had that Audible course that helps me to fill in gaps that I knew that this other course from Old Western culture, because of the age group that it was geared towards, it wasn't going to cover many other things that I was interested in. And I also had the book by Susan Weiss Bauer, which I'm trying to find. I know it's right to my left or to my right. There it is. The Medieval World. The History of the Medieval World. I'm sorry, I was trying to look at my book on the shelf. And I've been able to look at various chapters there to get more information, as well as information on what was going on the Asian continent and what have you, that was happening at the same time. And I like to get that bigger picture of what was going on. So I'm almost done with the Middle Ages. And then in the Old Western culture, I'm going to be moving into Unit 2, which is entitled Defense of the Faith. And we'll be reading the Proslogium, the Monologium, The History of the Kings of Britain by Monmouth, The Golden Legend, The Conquest of Constantinople, and The Life of St. Louis. So that'll be very interesting. What I'm liking a lot also in the current unit that I'm in is we're learning more about French history, and that's something that I've been intrigued by. So that's helping a lot, and that's through the Great Courses series, not through the Old Western Culture series itself. So that's where I am, and it's gotten better for me. Bede's history is interesting to me, very interesting. And he was very good. He tried to be thorough, he tried to be careful, and I can see that in the way he's putting together the history. He was, I know from reading the intro in the book that there were many people who admired Bede's efforts to be accurate, to be balanced, although we can never remove our life experience, our culture, what influences us. And you can see that obviously in there because this was written so long ago. You'll catch that as you read the book itself. But this has been interesting so far. The medieval times really do have loads of information. I'm sure there's a zillion other books I could read, but I'm finding the medieval times very interesting, and I can understand, I'm starting to understand why so many people are fond of the Middle Ages, and why the classicists, for instance, let me rephrase that, why classical education so admires the medieval times. I can see things like education and methods of teaching, order, all these things about the medieval times. I can see why this is so loved by classical educators. So there's going to be more to that as I move forward in this. So that's where I am, and I'm looking forward to more of it. And I've gabbed long enough. So thanks a lot, people, for hanging out with me, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.